2 weeks ago, the Chancellor stood at that dispatch box and delivered a budget which contained not a single measure to support growth. Today, in proposing the motion to disagree, the Minister has signed the warrant for a war on jobs. The honourable ladies at the dispatch box representing the government, but everyone knows it's the former Deputy Prime Minister who is calling the shots. We discovered this morning that Labour Together are already auditioning for the Prime Minister's replacement. Perhaps the Minister herself has an outside chance at the job. I think my money is probably more on the Right Honourable Member for Ashton under Lyme. Perhaps the Labour Party could have its first female Prime Minister just before we have our fourth. Given all this job insecurity, it's no wonder that they seem so keen on employment rights. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this isn't a bill for employment rights. It's a charter for a jobless generation. Thanks to the measures in this bill, thousands of young people will struggle for opportunities because the rungs of the ladder have been sawn off. Since Labour entered office, 144,000 payrolled jobs have been wiped out. Manufacturing, the oil and gas sector, construction, hospitality, all unable to make ends meet due to higher energy and employment costs. The unemployment rate higher every month of this government. Half of the jobs lost belong to the under-25s. See, I'll happily give way if the member wants to talk about the jobs lost in his own constituency.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Will he actually acknowledge that employment under this Labour government is higher than it was under the last Conservative government, with an average of 75%? And will he therefore apologise for his comments?
Angela Griffith.
Well, under the Conservative government, we improved the number of people in work. Unemployment fell to a record level. Since this government's taken office, every single month unemployment has been higher. Half of those jobs that have been lost belong to the under-25s. Youth unemployment, does anyone want to talk about what the youth unemployment rate is? 15% now under this government, and the number of young people who are not in education, employment or training has gone up by 25,000 on their watch before the impact of this disastrous bill. So the government claims to support workers, but their first legislative achievement will be to make more young people unemployed. How is that something that any member of this House could possibly support? So who is this bill really for? Well, the clue, as I've said before, is in the text itself. It mentions maternity rights just 3 times, but the word union, and no one's declared their interest on that side, Madam Deputy Speaker, it mentions the word union 478 times. The union right to roam, scrapping the turnout threshold on union strike ballots, more pay time off for union reps, automatic deduction of union political funds, ordering businesses to hand out government-written pro-union propaganda. Strikes will become far more common. But don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Well, the Secretary of State is chuntering from a sedentary position, but perhaps he'd like to listen to his colleague, the Health Secretary, who just last week said he'd had it with the unions. The last thing that patients need this winter is strike action. Back in July, the Health Secretary was citing the silent majority of doctors who didn't vote for strike action. My colleagues in the other place merely request that a strike ballot requires the turnout of 50% of the workforce. By rejecting this amendment, the Minister is allowing minorities to shut down hospitals, education establishments and public transport, whilst the silent majority of members are ignored. We should take a moment, Madam Deputy Speaker, to welcome the fact that the government has U-turned on day one rights. After months of relentlessly campaigning and a complete clear-out of departmental ministers, the government finally listened. And there's no shame in that. I told them it was unworkable. Business told them it was unworkable. It's just a shame it took so long. Just hours before the U-turn, the Prime Minister's official spokesman was telling journalists that they would overturn all attempts to water down day one rights. A Prime Minister without a backbone who doesn't know his own mind, causing a year of uncertainty for employers and workers alike. But let's keep that. I'll happily talk about the Prime Minister's lack of backbone.
uncertainty for workers. I just gently point out to him that Conservative ministers promised more than 20 times to deliver an employment bill, and having broken their promise to working people in this country, maybe he wants to talk a bit more about that and talk about the constituents that he speaks to who are in insecure work that his government did nothing about while this government acts.
Well, if acting, I just say respectfully to the honourable member, if acting is to raise unemployment, to cost young people their jobs and make sure that employers are not hiring and that we've got the worst graduate market for a generation, then bring that on. If that's what he came here to do, then I'm surprised at that. But let's keep this U-turn in perspective. It removes just one paragraph on just one page. Madam Deputy Speaker, instead of a 330-page bad bill, it's now a 329-page bad bill. Instead of the chainsaw that was needed, the government has wielded a pair of toddler safety scissors. And there's more. The removal of long-accepted caps on awards that can be made by employment tribunals, inserted with no impact assessment, no prior consultation, and the most last-minute of last-minute additions. Completely irregular, disrespectful to this House and to the other place. It will be ruinously expensive for small businesses, and in the public sector, it will leave the taxpayer on the hook for huge payouts for managers' failures at the expense of frontline services. The Independent Growth Commission reports today that that could be an additional $15 billion to the economy alone. I look forward to seeing what the OBR next thinks of that when they downgrade productivity. The Employment Tribunal, as the Minister said, is already 2 years long in backlog. This will make it a whole lot worse. Employers are all too familiar with being held to ransom by spurious claims. If you thought one woman's £50,000 payout after being compared in the workplace to Darth Vader was expensive, just wait until the Chancellor finds out what her colleagues have been saying about her. Dan Pollard, a partner at law firm Charles Russ & Speechley, said this development is frankly bonkers. The change would undoubtedly make the UK a significantly less attractive place to base staff within Europe. The measures in this job-killing bill have been written with absolutely no understanding of how business actually works. So, as well as voting against the motion that moves to infinite employment tribunal payouts, we'll be voting today in favour of flexible hours, in favour of seasonal work, against removing the turnout threshold on strike ballots, and against a subscription track for workers on union political funds that none of the members opposite would accept in any other private sector domain. Madam Deputy Speaker, this legislation is nothing less than a charter for national decline. It's a back to the 1970s bill which will do precisely that. It sacrifices the job prospects of our children and grandchildren just to help rattle the donation tin with their union paymasters. The government's U-turned once, admitting that their day one fantasy was a disaster, but changing one measure does not salvage this devastating bill. The Minister must know the damage she is doing to business and the economy. The Secretary of State must stop bowing to the left on his own benches, start listening to the job creators who provide the jobs we need, and shelve this unemployment bill today.
Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Shadow Secretary of State, of course, I declare an interest as a trade union member. And like millions of people who have been wanting this bill for many years, and as my honourable friend said, the Conservatives failed to deliver after promise after promise, I'm really pleased that we've got to this point now. I'm frustrated by the delay that we've had. So I welcome what my honourable friend, the Minister, and her contribution, and the Secretary of State for getting us this far, and hopefully those on the opposite benches will no longer frustrate what was a key manifesto pledge from us. And we've seen the decline, and you can tell which side the Shadow Secretary of State is on. It's very clear. We've been really clear. We're pro-business and pro-worker, and there's many, many good businesses here in the UK who welcome this bill and recognise the importance of giving people job security and fairness at work. If you're on a zero-hour contract, you cannot plan for the future. You do not know what's going to happen from one week to the next. That's not fair and reasonable for many workers here in the UK. And I say to the Shadow Secretary of State, I met more businesses that absolutely understand that there has to be a fair balance, and I think we've struck the right deal here. And I welcome the changes that have been brought forward, especially in particular with the timescales. Of course, the original deadline was October 27 because of the complexities. With the changes that have been welcomed with the trade unions and with business, we can now bring that forward. So instead of frustrating these measures, people can have those rights that they absolutely deserve and what they've needed. And in this context, for Government Amendment 20F, A and B, reducing the qualifying period for workers to gain protection from unfair dismissal for 6 months, I know ministers had faced difficult decisions and difficult discussions with the employers and worker representatives, but I know strongly, I strongly believe that the work that has been done has been necessary and we should be able to move forward now. And I thank the Minister for her work on that as well. And for those in the other place, Madam Deputy Speaker, I say there is now no more time to waste. Vested interests worked with the Tories and the Lib Dems and cheered on by Reform and backed by the Greens to resist the manifesto on which we were elected. And now there can be no excuses. We have a mandate for a new deal for working people, and we must and we will deliver it. That includes replacing exploitative zero-hour contracts with an offer of guaranteed hours. For low-paid workers, Madam Deputy Speaker, the security of knowing what they'll earn is not just a nice-to-have, it's the basis on which they can plan their lives. And I know the Minister will have them foremost in her mind when considering the low-hours threshold and definition of regular work. These rights will not just operate on paper, but in practice too. That's why we need robust fines for employers who illegally deny unions the opportunity to meet with workers or lawfully seek recognition. We must ensure that they cannot simply defy the law and shrug off a paltry fine. Madam Deputy Speaker, it has been a battle to pass this bill, but progress is always a struggle that we fought for. Its passage will be a historic achievement for this Labour government. It will benefit working people now and into the future. Now is not the time to blink or buckle. Let's not waste a minute more. It's time to deliver.